Josh Marston, our director. Jim Stern, producer. Jerry Goldstein, producer. Stacey Sargeant, who you saw in the film. Our screenwriter, Marcus Hinchey. And Mr. Jason Segel. Bishop Pearson, people have asked me, what's it like for you to see the movie? And so could you explain, like, what's it like to see a part of your life represented by, like, performers in a piece of cinema? Like, what is that like?
Well, first you look at the obituary and see, are you in there? Because usually you're dead, so it's, I've used the word surreal zillions of times, but it's never been so surreal as this one, to actually see such a painful, pathetic and prophetic occurrence in my life take place and then flashed on the screen so accurately. These guys put genius behind that makes us, we played it yesterday in Tulsa and everybody was crying the whole time because we went through it. They went through it.
Your parishioners were there at the screening in Tulsa.
Yeah, that's the town of my prime and of my crimes. So it all hit on the same thing. They call me bishop. Some of them call me son of a bishop.
It was such a religious crowd. Could you just tell people like what one of the questions from the audience was? Like, I understand there were a lot of give a sample question from the Tulsa audience, so you all know what you have to measure up to.
Well, there was a lady there from Germany, and she said, "So I'm from Germany, and Hitler is in heaven. What happens to people like Hitler?"
What is the answer to that one?
Well, I said there's a Hitler and a Hatler, or Hertler, in all of us. And that Hitler, if you read his diaries, called himself a Christian and Jesus is Lord. And his example for burning people was the Bible, hell. Mm-hmm. That's what God does to his enemies. And so he just helped God out by killing what he thought was the Jesus killers, the Jews. But actually, the Romans killed Jesus, not Jews. So, but he used the Bible.
Wait, is he in hell or not? Just is he in hell?
Yeah, well, he's in hell, but not now. You know, hell is consciousness. Heaven is too. So whatever he left here in consciousness as, I think he's walking that out to some point of remedial or purgative or corrective ultimates, that he would ultimately find a truth and not live in the kind of mental anguish and hatred that he did. That's hell itself.
I stopped listening after after Jews did not kill Jesus. I was good with that.
You were good with that one?
I felt good after that.
Well, they didn't. You know, the Romans didn't.
Were you surprised? Like, you saw the film for the first time when we showed it at Sundance, and you had been on the set, and you had read the script, and you spent hundreds of hours talking to Marcus, and many, many hours talking to Josh about your story. Were you surprised at any part of it when you saw it up on screen?
Well, I was surprised that these men who knew nothing about the genre, black, Pentecostal, Bible-toting, Bible-thumping, or devil-thumping, pew-jumping, Christians, to be able to capture the nuance, the ambiance, the essence, the emotion of who we are, put it on the screen with such accuracy. It's just, I'm befuddled by it. I can't believe you ate this and stuff, anything that's right. No, I'm kidding. A Jewish man who's not super religious and an agnostic, atheist type man whom Marcus is one of my dearest friends. He sat in services like this and cried, or we'd cry over the phone, or when I would cry, he would stop. I wondered if these guys would get it, and they got it. They got the pain, they got the emotion, they understood the devotion, and they understood the commotion, and they wrapped it up in a way that didn't offend anybody in general, not as a tool. It's a very soft way of presenting an issue that's very hard for a lot of people to go through, and it leaves more questions than answers. That's what we wanted to do. We wanted you to have a conversation, and I just think you were masterful. I did lay hands on him and pray that the Lord would use him, and God did. I'm kidding.
And then I've spent the day talking to Christian press, to Christian reporters, and it's mostly people who were raised as Pentecostals or evangelicals, and 3 of them, their parents were ministers and preachers, and they really loved the film, or at least that's what they said to me. And one woman said, especially singled you out, Jason, and said that you captured the cadence and tone, and even the way that Pentecostals clap. And she said she had to stop the screener because she was just like, how is he able to do this? First of all, can you demonstrate the Pentecostal clap for people who
I
might
can't
not
remember, but that phenomenon happens anytime I dance. We were lucky enough to get a little bit of rehearsal time, and we went to some services with Carlton, and I paid attention, but I think, when the Spirit is happening and you kind of give over to it, I think that you don't really have to do too much thinking.
No.
You know, and I think Chiwetel was so powerful as he was delivering those sermons and as he was singing that I didn't really feel like I had to do all that much make-believe.
But so this reporter said the way that you would smile when you were on stage was a Pentecostal smile. So it's not like...
That's really nice. Well, I'll tell you, I mean, I guess I'll answer this in a serious way in terms of my approach, but the part I was playing is not necessarily in line with my personal ideology. But I felt as though the only way to service how complicated the issue is to play that character as though he is his own hero in the story. As though his point of view is that we're responsible for people's salvation, and what you're doing is selfish, and we have a greater responsibility. And so I think trying to not approach him as the antagonist was sort of my goal, but to think of him as the center of his own beliefs.
Were you attracted to the film because it was so different from other parts that you usually get asked to play?
Yeah. Well, a few years ago, I decided that I wanted to do things that were important to me, just to me. I can't judge on a grander scale, but something where when I look back, I had a discussion with Chiwetel actually about how to choose parts. And he said, well, you only have so much time of your life. So what are you willing to trade X amount of months or years for? And boy, no one told me to make decisions that way when I was younger, I think that that's a really interesting way to think about it, and this movie certainly was worth that amount of trade and experience. I would do it again in a heartbeat.
Could you guys talk, Josh and Marcus, about the scene that you wrote for Jason and Chiwetel, the breakup scene, basically? Because I remember when you were working on it, you thought of it, the beats of it, as being like a couple breaking up, including there's a moment in the middle. Could you just talk about designing that scene and the beats of that scene?
Josh told me to watch scenes from A Marriage Again, the Bergman film, and just watch a marriage disintegrate. And then he said, then we talk again about the scene. And it was very much about a breakup, and it was an emotional breakup, and it was intended to be messy. It was intended to feel like it could go either way, that Carlton had become so accustomed to being able to get his way, and he was just asking too much of somebody in the scene. And this is true when he says, I gave you the best 20 years of my life. I put your wife ahead of mine and your kids ahead of mine. But the idea was to just try to make it as difficult as possible for Jason's character to leave the room.
Well, also there's that moment which is so amazing in it, which is like my favorite moment in the scene, where it seems like they're gonna make up again for a second. And then he's just like, so you're gonna announce, right? And I was like, oh, I remember when I saw that in the pages, I was like, oh, this is diabolical, the way you're doing it.
I mean, that was a very clear moment that we both identified, that you walk into that sort of situation with a speech prepared because you've been practicing and you've been imagining it, and then you get in there, you say your piece, and then the other person says something and begins talking, and you begin to remember why you love this person, and you begin to think, oh, maybe I've made a mistake, maybe we should stay together, and then they keep talking, and then you're reminded of why it can't work in spite of your loving them, and that is truly painful and difficult.
To me, I have to say, like, that scene for me is at the heart of why, like, I wanted to make the movie, like why I thought that this story from the radio show would be good as a film, because I felt for a long time that one of the worst represented groups in film, weirdly, is Christians. And that when Christians, especially evangelicals and Pentecostals, are portrayed in the news, on TV, and film, usually the way they're portrayed is just as these cartoons, instead of like from the evangelicals who I know, who I've been close to, as like actual people who are like smart and funny and usually actually taking seriously the mission of love that Jesus said. And I thought the fact that Jason's character is basically trying to pull him back out of love, not out of like, here's what the book says, but like, I don't want to see you go to hell, I don't want to see your family, I love you.
But the theme is based on, like, all of these scenes were based on conversations with Carlton. Like, the 4 white pastors in his church did go to Carlton's house, and he did invite them in, and they did sit down, and he wasn't expecting it, and then they said they were going to start their own church. So the starting point was the true story.
It's also interesting to mention that one of those preachers, as assistant preacher, he got on the phone with us, got on the phone with Jason.
One of the real life assistant principals.
To help in our writing of it and to help Jason in his playing of it. And if he did that, it was out of love for Carlton, even though he still to this day completely is of the opinion that Carlton is on the wrong path and is absolutely theologically in error. Nonetheless, loves him enough that he was willing to both to make sure that his side of the story was properly told, but also to help in something that was important to Carlton, and has since now, as I understand it, reached out to Carlton, and they're able to at least text message one another again, and hopefully to speak again.
Hey Josh, could you talk about what it's like, since you got to know Carlton before you were directing the film, what it's like to direct someone to be someone who you actually know, who's actually you were on the set a lot. How is that different from a normal directing job when you're directing like an incredibly skilled person to perform somebody who's real?
Mic drop. It's not something that I've ever done. The characters that I've created and directed before are at best amalgams of people whom I've met. And it was important to me that Chiwetel have, and that all of the actors have an opportunity to spend time with Carlton. And Carlton came to Atlanta where we shot before we were shooting, while we were in rehearsals, and preached at a local church so that the actors and all of the crew could see Carlton in action doing his thing, so that people would have an understanding of who he was. We had the benefit of an archive of YouTube videos of the way Carlton used to preach and the whole arc of his preaching. And Chiwetel was very invested in that, and he had long, very in-depth intellectual conversations with Carlton, and then about, I'd say a week before shooting, he turned to me and he said, okay, I don't want to hang out with Carlton anymore. And I understood why he said that. He said, I now need to make the character my own. And so we were very conscious and conscientious to on the one hand, continue to allow Carlton to be available and to feel like he wasn't suddenly doors closed on this movie being made about him, but also to respect Carlton, to respect Chiwetel. And so for the most part, Carlton remained sort of out of eye line of Chiwetel.
Oh, when he was filming.
You know,
I could see
there were certain
conscious.
days, Carlton would constantly check in, and sometimes we'd say, you know what, today's not a great day.
You said that a lot of times.
But then there was one day when we finally got about 2/3 of the way through the filming. We were in the church and we were doing all the sermons. And Carlton came and we were shooting the scene where, the big scene where everyone gets up and leaves the church. And it's a big production. It's a lot of people. It's a big scene for Chiwetel. And we got everything up and running. We rehearsed it and we finally did a take. And the first take, we screwed up. We sent too many people out the door. And halfway through the take, I almost called cut. It was very clear to me that we weren't going to use the footage because it was just, the doors were jammed. It looked silly. And we got to the end of the scene, I called cut. And I turned around and Carlton was in the back of the room crying. because he was where I was concerned about the logistics and the technicalities of the scene and making sure everything was working right. He was reliving the past. And I just remember I had to wait my turn until he had finished hugging his son for 5 minutes to apologize to him and to say, that's not going to be in the movie, don't worry. But I realized, as I was saying, that that wasn't even really the issue. The issue for him was that, I mean, you can describe your experience of the moment, but it was just reliving the past. And to me, that was what, and I think Marcus will attest to this, that is what enables this movie to be what it is his generosity and willingness to avail himself to us and share with us and to be vulnerable with us and give us all of these experiences and memories that he has.
Stacey, can you talk about being in the film? Like, this is your stage actor, this is your first movie. And like, were you... and you just like kill it, you're so fierce. Was it weird performing it? I don't even know, are you basing your thing on a person, a specific person?
Yes.
You are?
Yes, well, it's an amalgam of 3 different women that assisted Carlton, who I had the honor and privilege to be able to speak to, all 3 of them. What was the experience on set? I'm not sure what you mean.
I don't know, turning them into the person who, had you played real people before?
No, never. I mean, on stage, not in this way. Not
project, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I think that in speaking, having the chance to speak with all of them, I just took in everything that I could from all of them. Some of them there were slightly different perspectives based on what was happening in their personal lives as to why they stayed with him throughout all the controversy.
Were they all as like totally fierce as you're playing her in the film? Because I have to say, like, I didn't go to set because I was super involved in the writing of the script, but I feel like I have nothing to contribute on set, so I never met you on set. And after seeing the film, I was a little scared to meet you. I was like, oh, you're so nice. Oh, that was all pretend, wasn't it? And like, were those ladies like that?
I'm just shocked to hear that you think she was so fierce.
Well, I feel like she just makes clear, do not process them.
Had a fierce love, actually, for Carlton. And the main thing that I got from all of them was that they, in a way, wanted to protect him. And I just tried to bring that to what was on the page, and also prop him up during this time, because he's someone who built what he had, and then as he tried to work it out and navigate and negotiate through that time, the people that I think he thought, I mean, you can obviously speak to this, but the people that he thought would have his back and go on this journey of trying to figure this out with him just could not, didn't have the courage to remain curious. And I think that is
I see all
something
that,
that
but when I look at that performance, I also feel like she sort of sees through him. She can like see through him too.
Oh, absolutely. I think that she's a woman of few words, but can level him with her eyes, but also knows her place and wants to respect that position.
Yeah.
I brought Oral Roberts' 86-year-old secretary who served him for 60 years yesterday.
To see the film in Tulsa.
To see the film in Tulsa. She's had us a couple of strokes. I personally went and picked her up and brought her. And then Josh and I went and ate with her afterward. The role you played, Nikki was there. And she sobbed the whole time. And this morning she said, you so picked her up. And all of our people knew that. It was amazing. It was like a miracle that you channeled her energy. Jason's expressions, the way he looked, all the nuances. I was there, so I mean, when it actually happened, he captured 3 characters. She got 3 secretaries, and then Ruth, sitting there, could barely speak, barely see the big screen because of her infirmities, but she said, I enjoyed it on so many levels. I relived things because of the way you all portrayed them. It was just absolutely fantastic.
One of the things I should say, I feel like that might not be obvious, is that Marcus you spent so many hundreds of hours talking, that all the things that we have Oral say in the film are things that Oral really said to you. And that people who knew Oral have now, like, they saw the screenplay and have seen the film and have said, like, oh, that is the guy. Even the stuff about his son, that Oral said to you about his son that we put in the film, that, yeah, I was wondering, like, would you have said that stuff publicly if Oral was still alive?
No, I waited. I was very uncomfortable with it. These guys just put it in there anyway. When I started talking to Marcus, I was literally undressing in front of him spiritually. I mean, my whole emotions.
You were literally undressing?
Well, he didn't like what he saw, and I didn't like what he saw, but I was taking off stuff and layers and crying, and he would pause and let me finish. I can't watch it very often because my emotions are still pretty raw. I mean, I suppressed most of that pain,
yeah.
And put it someplace, and was never going to go there again. But I have to now, and so it's hard for me to sit through the whole thing because I relive it, and each time I see the scene, I see a detail that I forgot. One of those I put in some compartment someplace. Love is a really sloppy word. It can be very raggedy and too casual, and nobody can hate you or hurt you like somebody you love or who loves you. Compassion is a different term. Liking people. These guys they all loved me. And I wondered if they could finish liking me. The part that's so painful to me is all those love scenes where we were expressing emotions. I never doubted those people's love. I'd gotten some of them out of jail. I'd counseled them. I'd prayed with them. I'd been by the bedsides of their loved ones. I'd married them and buried them. So there was a covenant between us that was very, very difficult to see them walking out of that door in that way. And I knew I was hurting them, and I knew I couldn't explain it. So. And I think that I don't know how many of you felt similar emotions. There may be some pastors out here or something like that has been through things like that when the people you love don't understand you. And they love you too, very much, and don't understand you. That's very painful. And it's like, you're supposed to know me. You're supposed to understand. I'm entitled to your faithfulness, your covenant, your support. How dare you walk out on me? Painful.
Julie and Jim, I feel like we've been in this the longest. We've been making this film for 7 years, yeah. And you guys are at Endgame Entertainment, and it took us a long time to find a financier who would put up the millions of dollars it takes to make a period film like this, and take a risk on it. And I remember that there were major studios who we had phone calls with that were frightened to make a movie about somebody who was saying that the Bible was wrong. And studios that were scared of the reaction from a Christian audience, even though we would say to them, no, we want to make a film that's for a secular audience and a Christian audience, because we want to be respectful to the way that all these people feel. And it took Netflix to actually understand what we were trying to do, and they saw it as an asset to have an audience that would be a secular audience and a Christian audience. Can I ask you guys, like, is there some part of the film that when you see it now, you feel so especially proud of, a scene that when we come up on, you feel excited for? You know, like when we look at the cuts over and over, we all have like favorite moments. I know you fought for so many scenes, Julie. I mean, do you want to, like, yeah.
I mean, I don't think there's one. I think it's the achievement that as an entire group, I think that everybody, you know, here and some of them are in the audience too, that we achieved a, it doesn't really have a real antagonist, this film, right? And the fact that it's just people with different beliefs, and I think that the fact that we were able to achieve that was a line we were always trying to walk, and I think ultimately succeeded in.
Yeah, and I think that you know, there's obviously a lot said today about, you know, streaming and Netflix versus you know, traditional modes of distribution and going to theaters, and you know, and look, I mean, you know, I love going to movies, you know, so this is obviously a different experience for all of us. But that being said, though, this movie doesn't get made without this different kind of distribution model. You know, this is a film that, you know, rightly needed a certain kind of scope. You couldn't make this film for no money, and when you tried to put the movie together in other ways, which Ira, you and I, and Julie did for years, you know, it took a company that could come in and say, yes, but we don't care about those things because we are looking at this in a different way, to enable us to make the right film. And without making the right film, then, you know, then it's a process that's not nearly as rewarding. And look, I mean, you know, for me, this is a film that's, you know, at root about the issues of intolerance, which, you know, obviously today more than ever before, and certainly not in any of our lifetimes, is at the forefront of all of our thoughts and all of our, you know, concerns. So to be able to make this film in this way is a great gift, and that's a gift that's brought on by this new, you know, by this new technology, which is really, really important. I have a question for you though, because you're asking all the questions.
Yes, sir.
So, you know, you do this, you know, this great, you know, segment so many years ago, and what were your expectations and what were your surprises in the way this all sort of, you know, navigated?
Whenever we make a movie, this is our third film, I'm shocked at how much stuff, because how much driving around there is. And like, there's so much physical stuff. Like, it's just shocking. It just really is like moving objects and people from place to place. It's just like so animal compared to making radio, where like you're just voices. Like it's so, there's so many like lights and gear and people, and there's a whole department of cars. It's wheels and like, it's just,
there's things to look at too.
I know, it's just, I don't know, like it's just, that part is always weird. I don't know, every time we make a movie, I was like, never again. It's too hard. It's such delayed gratification. I don't understand how y'all do it, seriously. We have time for two quick questions, but I also, before we do that, I want to recognize Gina, Carlton's wife, who's here, who you saw for favorite film. Yeah, so we have time for, let's say, two quick questions, and then we'll call it a night. Yes, over here.
First of all, it takes great courage when you feel called from God to give a message, especially when you know people are going to be upset about it. And
Sorry. It takes great courage that you, when you felt pulled by the Holy Spirit, that you did speak up in front of thousands of people. You said the movie was pretty accurate, and you talked about what actually God did say to you. And my question would be kind of to the degree that the possibility that you misunderstood the question, that maybe so much God wasn't saying there's no hell, but that your job was to preach about sin and to tell people about sin, to lead a good life, but it wasn't your job to condemn them. Maybe that was the message more so than no hell, because if you read Matthew 18:9, Jesus himself does say there is a hell.
He didn't use the word hell in his language. He spoke Aramaic, not English. He used the word Gehenna. Ge meaning gully or gorge or valley of Hinnom. It had existed 500 years before he lived, and it was the town dump. It had burnt since the days of Jeremiah. That's where they put carcasses of animals and strangers in trash. It never stopped burning. It's out today, but it wasn't then. And it was the Valley of Hinnom. Dante's Inferno described it differently and made it more literal. But the people to whom he was speaking would have understood what he was talking about. A separation from God, a separation from your soul, is what you go through when, and he was a Jew, understanding Jewish culture, Jewish religion. Jews, the Bible is a Jewish Bible written to Jews or Hebrews about a Hebrew understanding of God. And so you have to read it in that light. People think that King James is King Jesus. King James interpreted it very inaccurately if you have to study the languages. So I've done a lot of research. Hell does not exist in the Bible. In the Jewish culture, hell is, the word Sheol means death or grave. So we came up with this pagan, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but the old-fashioned way of believing in right and wrong and heaven and hell creates this monster God. Think of a God, and you have to understand, my grandmother died because she played the dogs in San Diego in Tijuana the night before she died. My father, who was 78 years old when I had this conversation with her, came into the room, and she was laying with her arms hanging off the gurney, her breast exposed, her mouth hanging open, her eyes barely open, dead after 3 unsuccessful attempts to resuscitate her. My dad walks in, the eldest of her 7 children. He looks at her face, and she looks like she's in the place where she taught her people like her go to hell. He was horrified, and he sat in a funeral singing God Will Take Care of You and quoted the 23rd Psalm with his mother in a coffin. And he knew, and his drunk brothers, 2 of whom were preachers, and all of his cousins and all the saints of the church in San Diego, California, where we went, presumed my grandmother to be in hell. And my dad wanted to get her out. Any dad, any son would want to get his mother out of hell. And he had to sit there and praise God and think of God and say, God, I hope you forgive us so we don't go to hell like our mother. But he would have killed to get her out. He would have killed to keep her from going in. So the psychology or the psychosis in my father's mind, and millions of people who believe in a God who could sit around and dream up an idea about torturing people infinitely, especially if they're past the age of accountability, 1 minute past 12, you go to hell with Hitler and Stalin and Mussolini and Trump, excuse me, I get confused. So I've rethought hell. I know.
Don't pander to these liberals.
Okay, but also in Luke 16, when it talks about the rich man and...
No, I think, let's have another question. I feel like
the rich man was thinking and talking and trying to get his brother out of hell.
Yes, ma'am. Over here.
No, it's less of a question. It's more of an appreciation. You don't know how many.
She's saying it's less of a question. Here, a microphone is coming. Just take a look on your right.
Appreciation. I am a follower of your music, of your ministry. When I was a single mother with a small child, I watched you on TV. I saw the soundtrack of a lot of my house cleaning and driving is Azusa, the one you played. That ministry.
Azusa is the festival, is sort of like the gospel music South by Southwest that you created.
Yeah, I would get excited when you would be on television. I was heartbroken when you did an interview on KJLH where the 2 pastors that questioned you, and one of them wouldn't even give you the dignity of calling you pastor, and he only called you Mr. I hated that. I wanted to reach through that radio and just slap him because I was going, you are not being a minister. You are being hateful. I applaud you for reliving this and letting people see it from your eyes and from anybody's eyes that has participated in this. Wow. This is history. This is prophetic. This is fabulous. I am so glad to be in this room with you. I didn't know until 5 minutes before we walked in the door, or rather an hour before we walked in the door, that this was a story about you. Fabulous. I appreciate the work everybody has done, and I will always listen to Azusa and always appreciate you. And the last time I saw you on TV was at Walter Hawkins' funeral. I was so excited, I jumped up and down. That was the only thing that broke my sadness about Walter Hawkins being dead. Thank you so much.
All right, well, thank you so much for coming there. Thank you all for coming out. Tell your friends. We'll be on Netflix April 13th. Filmmakers, Bishop Pearson. Thanks so much.